how'd you link up with Nino Brown?
Nino I met at the 99 DMC. He that was the first year I entered.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I came third, he came second. I knew him from mixtapes and stuff. Like I was in school and I would hear the Nino Brown mixtapes and then I met him at the comp. And then it was kind of like, oh, you're Italian, I'm Italian.
Yeah.
Oh, you live like here. I live locally. Like we live like a suburb away, like 10 minutes away from each other. So it was kind of funny. And then just from there, I was I'd go to like a lot of his gigs and that and just watch and then after taking like the national comp, that's when it all kind of escalated. And I was like I was only doing like turntablist shows, no club gigs. And so I'd go to his club gigs and I'd like just watch and just kind of take in the DJing element of it because when I first started, I was on DJ element, but then like the turntablist stuff kind of came in and that influenced my set a lot. So when I was doing sets, they'd be really turntable based, and I was like, oh, I'm not getting that reaction that I want. And then when you go watch other DJs, I mean, because that was always my thing. The best way to learn to be a good DJ is to watch other good DJs. Sometimes it's not, having lessons. Lessons is like one of the middle stages of learning to be a DJ.
Sure.
Like any person that comes to me like, oh, I want to learn how to DJ. Like the first thing I say is like, go watch DJs. Like just stand there and watch them. Exactly what they do, how they set up, their first song, their last song, how they go through the transitions and how they feed off crowds. You can't learn that in a room like one-on-one. You have to be in a club to learn how to play to a club. So I was doing that a lot. I was like kind of traveling around, and then we just became really good friends, and then we were like feeding off each other. Like I had more technical, creative ability, and he had more knowledge of DJing. His ability of DJing was far beyond what I had at that time. So I kind of had to take from what he was doing, and then take from like guys like DJ Bones, who was like he's the god of turntablists in Australia.
Yeah.
He was pretty much the first one I saw as a turntablist. Like he was on. I remember as a kid, like I used to watch Rage a lot, which is like this music.
Yeah,
station.
I know about it. Yeah.
But then sometimes they went through this stage where they'd have like this show afterwards. It was like this music show, but it'd be more about local artists and stuff like that. And then I'd seen this turntablist show, and it was Bones,
Right.
and it was like scratching, but it was weird because it was like in this room, and there's like a DJ set up, and he's scratching in that, and then there's like a whole bunch of random people just standing like near the decks, like girls and stuff. Like
it was just kind of like an awkward situation.
It's like trying to make it look like it was something more than just one guy by himself. Because back then, that was like turntablists back then in like '98. It was unknown to the people.
Mainstream, yeah.
To mainstream people, it was like what wicka? It was just wicka. Yeah. That's what they, you know what I mean. So when I saw him, I was like, oh wow, this is different, you know. So this is something different. So I kind of like went on that tangent, and then with Nino, it was kind of like a back and forth thing. So I'd learn heaps of DJing from him, and then I'd learn a lot from Bones on the turntablist, creative, being really creative, and I guess that's led me to where I am now, where I've kind of been able to mesh the both together in a more harmonic way that it works for people, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, Nino's cool. And then we did the Blazing stuff together. Yeah. So yeah, after the DMC stuff, I got signed to Universal to do Blazing mixtapes with Nino, and it was like, cool, this is a good match. So,
but how did that come about?
It was literally right after the DMCs. It was, I had, like, I just finished up DMCs, and then I was like, all right, cool. What am I going to focus on next? Like, what's the next? Do I just kind of push harder and go for a world title? I was like, cool, I'm going to do that. And then literally as I made that decision, the phone rang. It was like, hey, Universal wants to speak to you about doing this project. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll see. And then I was like, okay, I can either focus on winning a world final. I can actually make something of my career in a sense of where I wanted to originally take it as a mainstream club DJ.
Yeah.
And to really put myself on the map, because I was only known in the turntablist world. I wasn't known, it wasn't like I was DJing. I wasn't DJing. I was still actually, there was at one point I was national champion DMC, and I had all these ITF titles, but I was getting no gigs.
Yeah.
Like no club gigs. It was only until like I went to clubs with like Nino, and like the MC would announce me, like, and I'd have to walk on stage. Like, it was kind of like a little bit of a celebrity status.
Sure.
I was like looked at as this. You had DJs, but then you had like, oh, this is the guy.
Yeah.
This is the guy that really does it, kind of thing. So I'd go to clubs and I would kind of have this, they'd be like, oh, we got Samrai, the national champion, and people would lose their shit.
Yeah.
But I wasn't doing any gigs. I was just doing shows, like 10-minute trick sets everywhere. And it was like, all right, cool. And then it was only until like the promoters would be like, so can you play like club sets as well? Like,
right.
Like, yeah, I can. And it would be like, and there would be times where I would do the 10-minute set, and the promoter that booked me would be like, so, because they wouldn't know. I'd have like a manager or an agent who would get me these gigs.
Yeah.
And they would sell it on like, he's a trick DJ and he does this 10-minute show. So when I would do my show afterwards, they'd be like, so do you play like, could you do like an hour, but just of like club stuff? I'm like, yeah, of course I can. Yeah. So then that kind of springboarded that. And then the blazing thing came in. I was like, all right, cool. It feels natural for me to go in this direction. People are wanting me to go in that direction, so I'm going to go in that direction.
Sure.
And my battle feet were kind of like, I was like, man, kind of like I've done the battle thing. My goal was never to, like, as I said, my goal was to not come dead last at a state comp.
Right.
To then go on and win, like, numerous national titles. Like, I'd won ITF titles, and I'd had DMC titles, and IDA. I had those titles, and I was like, man. And even at DMC, it was like I placed 10th in the world. It's kind of like, well, my goal was not to come dead last in my state. Like,
yeah. So you achieved a lot.
I went to the Worlds. I didn't even come dead last. So I'm good. I'm fulfilled.
Yeah.
And I think that was, my goal was never to like, oh, I'm gonna go win. Even now, it's still not like. It'd be nice, but my goal was never to like, I'm gonna go win a world DMC or ITF comp. It was kind of like, I'm just happy like doing what I do and getting like what I get. In that sense, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, it would be nice to win a world DMC. It's been in discussions, but every time it comes into discussion, it's like, I don't know, man. I just I'm content with where I'm at. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, I mean, you've achieved a lot, as a DJ over the years. So absolutely, I'd agree with that. What was sort of the benefits being signed to a major label with Universal?
The exposure. The exposure. You go from like a market, where people kind of know you, and there's some that know you, like, and it's. I mean, turntablism and that is it's still very underground. Yeah. Even to today, it's still very underground. Like, it's not a mainstream thing.
No.
DJing is a mainstream thing because everyone's a bloody DJ. But turntablists, you're trying to explain what a turntable is to someone as what? Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm a DJ, but I do crazy stuff.
Yeah.
That doesn't even make sense. Like, but that's how you got to explain it. It's like, I'm a turntablist, which means I'm a DJ, but I do like stuff that's better than DJing. But it's more advanced, and you can't. It's hard to explain to someone who doesn't know.
Yeah.
Who, in the minds of a mainstream person, they just think, oh, DJing is like, just pressing a button and playing a song. Like, nah, that's not what we do.
Yeah.
So Blake being signed kind of put me on that level to, introduce turntablism to Australia on a mainstream level, because they had Nino, who was doing the disc where it was more for the, for people who knew what DJs do. Cool. DJ mixes records, has this. And then they'd hear mine, and it was like scratching and doubles and edits and just the craziness. And be like, oh, wow, what's this kind of thing? So then every year I had to kind of like introduce it in a different way, and, and then even with my club sets, because then I was starting to get a lot more club sets.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was kind of like, how do I introduce this in the best way possible where it doesn't, like we all went through that motion as DJs where you kind of like go, okay, there's too much scratching and then there's no scratching kind of thing. And girls don't like scratching, but then sometimes they do, but then guys love it. And then sometimes it's too much, and then it's messy or it's clean, or am I being too technical? Am I being funky? It's kind of like I had to go through those years of trying to master like how do I balance out the DJing and the turntablism in a club?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So, but the signing kind of pushed me into that mainstream market, because then it led on to more, because being signed then got me signed to the first like major national radio show with Nova, because back then radio was real kind of like just local hip hop stations. Mm-hmm. That's why they called local hip hop stations. So it was kind of like, all right, local. But then some of the other ones were picking up hip hop, and then it was only until like the major network kind of came to me and was like, we want you to do your own show. I was like, oh shit, okay, cool. Right. So that was a first. You know what I mean? So I was like,